Well, hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Today is May 16th, and I am Valencia Stovall, and I welcome you to season 7 and another exciting episode of Issues and Answers with yours truly, Valencia Stovall. You are listening to the new WCEG Network, WCEGTalkRadio.com. We are the worldwide community empowerment group where we speak life into the community. And I must read this disclaimer. The topics and opinions of those of the show hosts and guests, and not WCEG Network. Like us on Facebook, follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram at WCEG_talk_radio and at WCEG Network. Thank you for your continued support and tell a friend. And also we're on LinkedIn as well. So we pause today to continue to pray for peace in this world. You know, last week, my mother's brother, Uncle Samuel Cater, passed away. He served in the Air Force as the Sergeant First Class, which I didn't know. I knew that he had served in the military, but just wasn't sure as far as which branch. And you know, he was not a talker like most of us that like to talk, but he had a great personality. So we definitely would miss him and praying for his wife and rest of our family as well. And you know, we're also looking at tragedies that have happened across the United States and other states with gun violence and all kind of other tragedies that are going on. And so, we're still in a war. And when there is war, we're still associated with the war. Whenever there's war, there are casualties and disruptions. So there's a lot of unrest in our state, our country, and in the world. May God continue to change the hearts of the wicked and give leaders the wisdom that's needed for them to lead. And when there are evil leaders, the people are so sad, they're sad. But when there are righteous leaders, the people will rejoice. So we are praying that the people, we can start rejoicing because we have righteous leaders. So we're going to have a drum roll. There are only 8 days until the primary election. Early voting is still happening, but ends on this Friday, May the 20th, y'all, this Friday. So every aspect of your life, our lives are affected by policies that are placed into law by individuals who we choose on our ballot to represent us. Your voice is your vote, and you always hear that. And your vote is your voice. So don't continue to complain. We must take action. And make sure you have registered to vote, to go to mvp.sos.ga.gov to check your status when it comes down to voter registration. Because early voting is still taking place, you can still early vote until Friday. After Friday, you must go on Tuesday, May the 24th, to your polling location. And so the only way you would know that for sure is going to my voter page with the Secretary of State's website. So on today's show, our special guest is none other than my mentor, former State Representative Alisha Thomas Searcy. And we're so excited to have her. She's a candidate for a state school superintendent. And so for people who may not know, and she's going to talk about that, but we just are so excited that she's able to take a little time. With that statewide race, she's having to go across the whole state of Georgia, all 159 counties. And that's a lot of work, I know, for doing it in 2020. And previously, when she ran, was about 8 years ago, she had to do the same thing. So welcome, Alisha, Representative Honorable Searcy, back to our show, Issues and Answers. And we're just so excited to have you. So I'm going to take a brief moment to let people know who you are before we actually get into the conversation. So when Former Representative Alisha was elected in 2003. Many of you all may not know she was the first African American to be elected in Cobb County. And when she was elected in 2012, when I was elected, when she was elected before then. But when I was elected in 2012, that's when I got a chance to meet her, and she became my mentor. I asked her to be my mentor because I saw her boldness down at the state legislature when it came to education. So, I can't recommend anybody else, anyone better that knows about education from not only the policy side of it. She also served as a superintendent at Ivy Prep charter school. At that time, it's a state charter school. And so she knows the insides of that. And then being a mother herself. And then also, being involved in policies across this United States, so not just locally. So I'm just so excited for her to be here. She's a fearless fighter for equity in education, and that's important as a state superintendent. She's authored and co-authored several bills that have been signed into law, one of which is very, very important out of so many, was a constitutional amendment that has allowed our charter schools to be able to exist in the state of Georgia right now. And so all of y'all know how my fight is for charter schools. So welcome to Issues and Answers. And so tell us a little bit about the role of the state superintendent. Many people don't understand, what the role. They know what a superintendent is on the local level, but when you start talking about on the state level, many of them do not know.
Yes. So first of all, thank you for having me. And I'm always honored when I hear you call me your mentor, because you are absolutely a powerhouse on your own. And I am grateful that we got to serve together. And I miss serving with you. We did some good work together, and I don't think there were any stronger advocates for children in the state legislature when we were there. Let me just say that, okay? So the state school superintendent is responsible for running the entire Department of Education. So when you think about the state's standards that we use, or the curriculum that we use, graduation requirements, working with the legislature on the state budget as it relates to K-12 education, working with the State Board of Education, which is a group of individuals who are all appointed by the governor by congressional district. The State Board of Education is responsible for promulgating or putting together all of the rules that school districts have to follow once an education bill is passed into law. And the state school superintendent is actually an ex officio member of the State Board of Education. And so this is the person, hopefully one day soon, around January of 2023, she will be the chief champion, I think, for students, for educators, and for parents when it comes to public education in our state. And I will just tell you, Representative, that I can't think of a more critical time that we need a state school superintendent who has experience in the legislature. We do not have time for on-the-job training to figure out the ins and outs of how the legislative process really works, who the players are, how you get things done. Even when I think about some of the laws that I passed as a legislator and having to work with the Department of Education, the superintendent at the time, and the state board to put together those rules that the school systems have to follow, that's a process all in itself. And so, frankly, it's unimaginable to me how folks run for this office and really don't have an understanding of how all of these things work. And not just knowing how they work, but having a track record of being able to get things done.
Most definitely. And I remember, we both served on the education committee, and the legislative process is one thing, but actually when it comes down to making sure that it's executed, that is the responsibility of the state superintendent.
Yes.
And being able to understand how that all works is very, very essential, because many times, as you know, there were bills that were passed and the superintendent office or someone from the office may come, would be at the meetings, and it just sometimes didn't make sense. So having someone, that's in that office that understands the structure and the process of how legislation works makes it easier when it comes down to those laws that are going to have to be executed by you being in the superintendent's office. So it's very, very essential that I didn't understand how important it was until I became a legislator and having to understand, that whole process. And I went to many state board of education retreats where that's where the real work is, when they're planning for the new year. And just understanding all of that is a lot. And with you having the experience, I think is going to be essential. I can't even think of, I know the time that I was there, we didn't have a state superintendent that had the legislative experience.
No, I don't know if we've ever had one, frankly. Okay. And it explains a lot. I was talking to some legislators the other day, and they were talking about how over the years, so much has been stripped from the Department of Education. And it is because the legislature did not respect them, the state superintendent. And so I don't think people understand when you don't have those relationships, when you don't know how this stuff works, you just, with all due respect, coming in off the street and don't really understand all these dynamics. And I get it, right? You don't know what you don't know. I remember distinctly being in my office as the superintendent and, facing all the challenges that a superintendent faces in Georgia and saying, thank you, God, that I did not win 8 years ago, because I had no clue. I thought just having the legislative experience would have been enough. It is not. What is also critical is having experience running schools, because, Valencia, when you are, looking at the education budget, we know that it's complicated. We know not everybody understands that there are 19 different segments, and, you have to understand as a superintendent how you do your CPI report so that you can, and this from being a board member and working directly with charters, but most people have no idea what these things mean. And so again, it's such a huge learning curve. And I remember saying to myself, I'm so glad that I didn't win, because I would not have had a clue about what it means to even, you talked about the execution of these laws. I co-sponsored the state teacher and leader evaluation law. And at the time, it was all about making sure teachers got meaningful feedback, helping them want to, improve their profession. But then when I became a superintendent and had to evaluate principals, I was like, this is not what we intended. This is not what this is supposed to be. And so I have a very unique set of experiences passing laws, executing them as a superintendent, and bringing that experience to bear as a state superintendent.
Right. And so, being able to have that experience, and like you said, not just the legislative experience, but also on top of it, having been a superintendent, and not just a superintendent in a very, I would say, diverse and challenging situation.
Yes.
Where you had all kind of things as, having to run a state charter school. And then having less amount of money that you were receiving. So you really had to be good with budgeting. Yes. You had to make sure that you were hiring the right educators and administrators, because you didn't have a room for error when it comes down to being the superintendent of a state charter school.
Yes. And we had 3 schools. I had 2 middle schools and an elementary.
Wow. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I basically was superintendent of 3 LEAs. And, LEA, for people that don't know, that's a local education agency, or another word for school district. And the state charter schools, each school is its own LEA. So I was running 3 of them at one time.
With limited funds,
with limited funds, with limited resources, like even local authorized charters, like in APS as an example, where they actually like charter schools, they benefit from what all the other schools get. So I was talking to a friend the other day who runs the Kendesi schools, and she was saying how all the teachers K-2 went through Orton Gillingham training, which is a reading program, one of the best in the country. So all the APS teachers, all the Kendesi teachers, that's how this stuff is supposed to work, right? When Publix donated gift cards to all the APS schools, those schools got them too. So when you have an authorizer who likes you, right, and who partners with you and sees your children as the same as theirs, there's so many benefits versus the challenge. And again, going back to this state charter commission, I was one of the authors of it. But then when I became a superintendent of one, I was like, oh, there are some things we didn't quite get right in the policy. But you don't know that unless you have run schools or been intimately involved in that leadership process.
Right. Most definitely. They call it boots on the ground.
Yes.
With it. And so you definitely have that. And so now we're dealing with unprecedented times with the pandemic. And everyone is concerned about education because it's the foundation.
Yes.
It's the determining factor of whether we're going to have productive citizens or non-productive citizens, or in between productive citizens. It also is a determinant factor when it comes to economic development across our state. Right now we've been boasted as being the #1 state to do business, where every business is looking for a workforce, and that workforce has to come from the education system. So kind of talk to us about what do you see as some of your plans and how you're going to tackle all of the different arms that are involved in the pandemic, and with making sure our students, trying to get them back to where they need to be, and supporting the educators as well.
So that's a massive question. But let me try to break it down in a few ways. So first of all, I think we all should be concerned about learning loss and what's happened to our babies in the last couple of years, right? So first, it's assessing, and I know districts are doing some work. All of them have received hundreds of millions of dollars to address the impact of COVID. 20% of those funds have to be directed towards learning loss, which is interesting to me. Feels like it should be larger than that, but that's what the rules and regs say federally. And so, yes, there are districts that are doing, summer programming, after school programming. I think all of that is important. What I would do even more so is assess students, individually, give them individualized plans, because there's so many gaps in so many ways. And while we can assume that lots of students, and we know the research says that Black students, had a wider gap than white students, but we can't make assumptions, right? And so we need to personalize those plans and those resources for each and every single student, all 1.8 million of them. I also think mental health is a huge piece. Certainly, we have to focus on the academics, but we also have to make sure that we have mentally healthy students, right? Sitting in schools, ready to learn. And if we just stop and think, for some families, school was the safe haven for children, right? They got away from the things that they were seeing at home every day. And so some of our babies have seen a lot. Some of them have seen death and, had to help take care of a loved one who had COVID, so there are some things that we have to address from a mental health standpoint. And I would really like to see more districts. I've seen it happen in Bibb County as an example, where they're investing some of those funds in mental health services, contracting with a mental health agency, getting mental health providers in every school. That's the direction I think we need to move on. And let me just say this finally about COVID and where we are in terms of education. One of the reasons that I decided to get in this race, there are many, but one of them was hearing this conversation that we just want to get back to pre-COVID. No, we don't. There were hundreds and thousands of children who were already stuck in low-performing schools, right? Who were not receiving a high-quality education, who were not reading on grade level. We still have very low numbers in terms of students reading on grade level. And then I think maybe even more important than that is the delivery system for education. You know, we talk about I tell the story of my daughter who's now 15, talking to my mom about what school was like when she was in school, when my mom was in school. And so as mom starts describing, you know, the classroom, my daughter's like, that sounds exactly like 2022. And so if you were to Google a picture of what school looked like in the 1700s, it looks the same as it does in 2022.
Antiquated.
So my biggest focus and plan is to reimagine education in Georgia, because we cannot keep delivering a telegram education to a TikTok generation. Hello, right?
Yeah.
So it's reimagining. It's, you know, I am envisioning design thinking sessions all across the state of Georgia, because it may look different in rural areas. It may look different, you know, in suburban areas. Some, you know, areas want to use technology in different ways. There's so many possibilities. And I want to ask teachers, if you didn't have all this red tape, what would teaching and learning look like? Right? What if we gave grants to high schools that they could redesign what high school looks like in Georgia? So I'm excited about the opportunity to break off the chains, if you will. Stop this, you know, let's get back to pre-COVID. I never want to return to school pre-COVID. I want us to look forward and be thoughtful about the opportunities that could be available to our young people if we had leadership, right? And people who are forward thinking, you know, who want to have partnerships with the labor unions, as an example, to do pre-apprenticeship programs at our schools, right? Who want to partner with Microsoft and Google, who are all opening these huge offices here in Atlanta. And I'm going to steal this phrase from a friend from an event I went to the other night. Instead of us building a school to prison pipeline, I want to build a pipeline to prosperity, right? So there's so many opportunities out there, but again, it requires leadership and forward thinking.
Yeah. You know, I just get excited anytime, you know, talk about reimagining education, which is, you know, part of my platform, the book. And I think that because it's so antiquated and our children deserve so much more, and if they had the opportunities and the exposure, you know, the sky would be beyond the limit. Yes. You know, and so, you know, and then, like you said, hearing from educators, because many times, you know, when we did the different surveys, study committees, we would go across the state and listen to educators saying, nobody's listening to us. You know, we are professionals. We have gone to school in these particular areas of focus, and now we're not able to execute or be able to deliver education how we think it should be. Yeah. You know, we can't have a cookie box type of education with them. And I think if, like you said, you allow them more freedom and the resources and support that they need. And like you said, those design models, those individual education plans, just like those IEPs we do for students with disability.
That's right.
And it's student-centered when the focus is. And that way you're ensuring that the child is getting what they need as far as being able to move forward. So those are definitely, you know, I was getting excited as you were talking about that whole reimagining education and breaking the chains off of education, because that's what we need. And we need someone who is not afraid to step outside of the norm and have a team that's not afraid to step outside the norm in order for that, because education is such a huge impact on what we do in the future of our state. Yeah, everything. Yeah. So, you know, you're dealing with a lot of diverse school districts across the state. And a lot of times I used to hear as legislators, you know, the metro always gets all of this, you know, all of the things, and rural are kind of left behind. And you talked about a little bit, you know, earlier when you were addressing the reimagining of education. So how do you deal with different diverse school districts and the different leadership styles of those individuals who are leaders, like the school board members and other superintendents?
Yeah, you know, I think certain leadership characteristics, you know, good leaders, those leadership characteristics transfer no matter what role you're in. So when I was a legislator, I was known as being a good listener and, able to leverage relationships. So even when I think about this race for state school superintendent, I hadn't been in politics for 8 years, which is a lifetime.
Yeah.
But as soon as I jumped in the race, there are a whole bunch of people who were like, yes, let's go. That's relationships. Yeah. And so I would do the same thing as state school superintendent when we talk about diverse districts across the state. I would leverage the relationships that I already have. As a consultant, now I work with different districts, different schools, in different parts of the state. And so I would leverage those relationships, but I'd also spend a whole lot of time listening, because what I know more than anything else is that until you've lived an experience or somebody has told you about it deeply, you have no earthly idea. So we can all from Atlanta talk about what needs to happen in rural Georgia, but I've never lived there. I've never taught there. I've never, led a school there. And so I think it's about listening. I can tell you that I'm deeply concerned about the lack of broadband available in our rural areas. I have seen our U.S. senators bring some money home to help build infrastructure there, but there's a lot more that is needed. When we talk about equity, sometimes we think more about race, but I think about equity also in terms of rural districts who don't have access to very basic things that we take for granted. Try calling a friend that lives in Lincolnton or Warrenton or other places and see how good their service is. It's not. So how is it that, again, in this TikTok generation, we are believing that all of our Georgia students should have access to a high quality education, but they don't have access to the same resources, right? So we've got to focus on that. So I want to spend a lot of time listening. What do you need? You talked about how teachers or other educators talk about how they don't feel heard. That's the first thing on my list, is listening, giving teachers in particular a platform to speak unafraid, right? Without the consequences of what happens when you speak up. But what do you need? How can we help you be successful in the classroom? So that's how I plan to be successful, listening, getting an understanding of what those issues are. I also want to create an office of equity within the Department of Education. And the sole mission of that office will be to look at every single school in the state of Georgia, measuring against, a set of criteria that every school should have. And so thinking about DeKalb as an example, I love my friends in DeKalb County, but can we talk about the fact that if you got $500 million, which is the number that they got, why do we still have children having to do videos talking about stepping over human waste? And then to learn later that there were 37 other schools worse than the one we saw in the news. So someone has to explain to me as state school superintendent how it is that we have children going to school in dilapidated buildings.
Right.
So
and it's not that, and it's not that they didn't know, because
they know.
Yeah, because if you in your individual school district, you have, your maintenance and all of those departments that are regularly supposed to be looking at the buildings. And then when you think about the taxpayers, you're asking for E-SPLOS every 4 years to be able to build buildings and repair and all of that that money goes towards. So you're right that equity is definitely going to be important, because if they're not in a building that's safe, that has a welcoming climate, and not just for the students, but for the parents and the educators as well, they can't learn. You can give them everything they need, but if they don't have that, starting off, they're starting off at the end of the line. They're not starting off on the same foot.
Exactly. And we're talking about one of the wealthiest districts in the state. So I don't know if it, people say it's the board, it's the superintendent. I don't know whose fault it is, but I know that something's got to be done, and someone needs to stand up for the children. And to your point, and for those educators, I had a meet and greet with some DeKalb parents a couple of weeks ago, and one of the more well-to-do districts has a strong well-to-do schools in DeKalb County has a strong PTA. Do you know that they had to raise money to get locks on the inside of the classroom.
What?
Yes. Like, I wish I was exaggerating, but this is a well-to-do school in DeKalb County. The parents' organization had to raise money because the teachers were not able to lock their doors from the inside. So when you think about these mass shootings, these safety issues, in 2022, they had to rate, the district would not give them money for this. They had to raise money through the PTA to get teachers locks in their doors. That has to be unacceptable.
Yeah, and you think about it, if that's a well-to-do school district, just think of what's happening in the not well-to-do school district, how much worse, you know, of that is going on, not just the locks, but everything else that can, you know, imagine that could be going on.
Exactly.
And you have, you know, like you said, you have an educators crying out saying, I want to teach. You know, I came to work, I got into this profession because I want to make a difference with students. But some things are just out of their control. The environment is out of their control in these cases. Yes. And like you said, you have to have someone that's going to be the overseer of making sure that in the state of Georgia, that we have equitable education for all students. And, and it's not depending on where you live. And you can even see now when you just said that you can live in the better places and it's still not equitable. Exactly. You know, so you have to have, you know, that person like yourself, you know, that knows, has keen eyes, and then know how to react and what to do next. Because you can see a problem, and if you're not solution driven, it just stays a problem.
That's right. And going back to what I said, if you don't know who to call, if you don't know what the state policy says, you know, if you've never had to do a facilities plan for a school or a district, you have no idea how to even address these matters.
Yeah. And then, you know, of course, each year when we were passing the budget, there was always money set aside for building facilities.
That's right.
Bus, you know, all of this transportation that would, you know, being controlled by the state as a supplemental to the local school district outside of the East Plus money that they receive. Yes. So like you said, then, okay, if you're not doing what you're supposed to do, then we know that this money is allocated to you, and if need be, but we're going to work with you before we have to lay the hammer down. Right. But we're going to work with you and making sure that everybody understands their roles. And a lot of times they don't understand their role. And I, you know, even found that with some of the school board members as well, not understanding what their role and how critical they are in what's going to happen in that school district. So like you said, starting that leadership at the top and trickling down, like you said, having that eye to know, oh, okay, I know this happened, this is supposed to happen, but this is not happening. Okay, what's the next step? What's the next step? What's the next step? And it has to be somebody that's a strategic thinker, like you have always been. I've always known you to be a strategic thinker. And so when you have a leader that's a strategic thinker, then everyone up under that leader is are going to be strategic thinkers. That's right. You know, that. And so, you know, it's so much that needs to be done with our education system. And I love the idea about the apprenticeship programs. One of the things that I've been talking about is every student graduating from high school that has a certification in a trade. Nice. That way they're able to go right to work and take care of themselves. And, you know, incorporating it with the dual enrollment that's already in place, you know, strengthening that. You know, there's so many programs that we have that are underutilized, and a lot of times the parents don't know, and the teachers don't have time to find out. Even with our work-based learning, and you talked about earlier about the businesses like Microsoft and all of them, you know, them partnering with really true partnership, not just a regular old-time school partnership.
Right, give me some money. No, we want more than that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, more than that. And you have to have a leader that understands that there's more that corporate America wants to do and has to do, because their investment as well in their workforce for the next 5, 10, 20 years. And so they're willing to do whatever they need to do, but they have to have a leader they can work with that can be able to make sure they walk them through what the process is, and looking at the diversity over the state as far as the different needs of the school districts, and being able to channel them in the right direction. And hey, you're the person for that. I can't, you know, think of anyone else on that level to really take us to where we need to be in the state. So, Miss Alisha, I know that you have so many more stops to make. How can people find out more about your campaign? If they say, I like what she said and I want to help, I know we have a couple of days left, 8 more days before primary. How can they help and how can they donate to your campaign or whatever is needed to make you be successful on May the 24th?
Thank you. That's my favorite question. After talking policy, of course. So my website is searcyforsuperintendent.com. Searcy is SEARCY for superintendent.com. On all the social media platforms, we're Searcy for Superintendent as well. And if you want to donate, you can do that on the website. And I would ask, if people are into donating campaigns, and I hope you are, whether you can do $10 or $5,000. We need the help because it helps to get the message out. We've got a strong plan in place for our field operation for the next 7 days. And we need money in order to execute that. And so I would appreciate that support. And I would just say too, if you like what I have to say, if you know that you're going to vote for me, and I'm grateful for that, and you should listen to Valencia because she already told you she don't know a better person who could do this job. Thank you very much. Tell people, because no matter how much money I raise or don't raise, if people don't go and vote, it doesn't matter. And I need people to understand how serious the stakes are here. The 3 people that are running in the primary with me are very nice people who have good intentions, but they do not have close to the experience that I have. In terms of being a state legislator, there is no other. In terms of running schools, there is no other. That experience is absolutely critical if you're going to be an effective state school superintendent. So this isn't just, oh, I like her. This is, I want to protect our public education system. I want to make sure that we change what needs to be changed and we reimagine public education together. So we got to have a superintendent that does that. And if I don't make it out of the primary, it won't matter, right? So the stakes are high. And so take a moment to text, 10 people right now and say, vote for Alisha Thomas Searcy for state school superintendent. Because when they hear from you, they trust you, right? So that's what I ask people to do. So donate, go on my website, check me out if you need to learn more information. We need volunteers. You can also sign up there. But I just want to thank you, Representative, for allowing me to come on for a few minutes and sharing your platform, and for the awesome people who are listening and watching. Thank you. Let's go vote. Let's make history again. I'm the first African-American elected from Cobb County to the Georgia House of Representatives. And when we win state school superintendent, I'll be the first Black superintendent.
Wow, that's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful. Well, thank you so very much, Miss Alisha. So I know you have to run, and I'm going to finish out my show. We used to do a segment called Say What, and I do my little announcement. So we'll definitely be talking again soon. And, my prayers are with you and your whole team, for victory without a runoff.
Amen. Say it again, sister. No runoff over here, okay?
No runoff.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Okay, take care. Thank you. So you've heard it, here with us on Issues and Answers. Alisha Thomas Searcy is a candidate for, Democratic candidate for state superintendent. And this is a position that everyone in the state of Georgia can vote for. And so in order to vote for her, we'll have to pull or ask for a Democratic ballot to be able to cast your vote for her. So we're coming down to a couple of minutes that are left in this particular show. And we thank her for stopping in. And I definitely, a lot of things that she was talking about, with me running for Congressional District 5, which is the former seat that was held by the late John Lewis. You have to have someone that you're working with on the federal level. And I know that we would definitely be able to work together on those education issues. As you heard her talking about the reimagining, that's part of 3 Bs. Mine is the buck, which is rejuvenating our economy and our small business focus, and the book, which is reimagining education. What if we really stepped outside of that box and really gave our students the opportunity to really have more individualized education just suited just for them. How much more success we will see, and not just on the academic part of it, but also them internally, mentally, physically as well. And then the last B, of course, is the ballot, voter empowerment. That's why we asked former Rep. Searcy to come on, because we want to empower you as the voter so that you will know who are the candidates, and you're able to hear for yourself, what their platform is and what their plans are, when they become elected. Accountability is very important. And so you have to understand what the responsibilities of the elected officials and how do you hold them accountable. So, you could go to my website, gostovall.com. Yes, we only have 8 days that are left. Wow, the time is ticking away. And if you would like to help support what we're doing on our end, definitely go to the website. You can always, reach out to me individually. And even like she said, was a great suggestion. Tell your family and friends, commit to say, I'm going to contact at least 20 people by Friday, because Friday is the last day for early voting, to vote, for your candidate, which would be me, to help me get into office. I have a lot of plans, but like she said, they can't be executed unless I'm actually sworn into office. And that cannot happen unless and until you actually go out and vote. So you can vote early, and that's important. So our announcements, of course, 7 Pillars. I always talk about 7 Pillars Career Academy. They are now also accepting new students. So if you have a student in 6th through 9th grade, and you're looking for a change, a more smaller classroom setting and a personalized education where they really, really make sure that they are in touch with the students, check out 7 Pillars Career Academy. Their phone number is 404-500-1294. And of course, once they meet that amount that they're only allowed to enroll, then you have to wait and you'll be placed on the waiting list. So go ahead and get your information in, contact them, and find out what's going on at 7 Pillars Career Academy. Over the weekend, we participated in the Family and Wellness event that was hosted by Hand, Heart, and Soul organization, and Little Ones, and several other entities that were involved. And it was really nice. They had cooking demonstrations that were there, yoga. They had a lot of new wellness organizations that were there talking about, how to keep you well. And, in some of our areas, they are food deserts. And so where we don't have access to the best quality food and fruits and vegetables that are affordable. Also, I want to give a shout out to Dr. LaWanda Falami, who I know is watching. Also to Arvis Walker, who was a former PTA president at Forest Park High School, and also to Miss Arnold, who was the teacher advisor. Many of you all always hear me talking about the project we did, Environmental Assessment Survey Project, that we conducted about 3 years ago. And at that time, some of the students were 9th graders. They're now 12th graders. They're graduating next week. Wow. And so one particular student, Evan Minor, we saw him at one of the candidate forums. He was actually one of the ones asking those hard questions. And he invited Dr. Falami and I to the school during one of their meetings. So they started the Earth Tomorrow Club. And it is facilitated through the National Wildlife Federation. And shout out to Crystal Jennings as well, who helped support that project. But to know that our students are concerned about the environment. I mean, I think it was about 20 to almost 30 students that stayed after school to talk about their project. And they have a garden that they have already been working on at the school. And they're working on some other hydroponics project that'll be actually starting up next school year. So if any of you all are out there and you're environmentalists and you love community garden and all of that, definitely reach out to the school and talk with their advisor at the school. They need a lot of things, but these students are determined to work with what they have to make it work. And so we as a community have to support them. Who knows? They might be the next scientist that ends up finding a cure to the pandemic, finding a cure to cancer, finding a cure to anything, because it starts in the ground and what's grown in the ground. So I just wanted to give that shout out to us, the work, the dedication that we did, and going every week. We went once a week for an hour every Wednesday. We were there at that school, and not knowing what the future was going to produce. And look, we planted a seed. So, if we're all able to plant those seeds, how much more growth that our young people will have. And so I'm really excited. That was part of my announcements to make sure I made Election Day again, May the 24th. Y'all, that's on Tuesday. So it's right around the corner. It's too late for you to send in your absentee applications. That time has passed. So if you have not put in your application, then you will have to go in person and vote. So make sure you vote and voice your vote is your voice, and take some other people with you. All right, so now we're down to the Say What segment. So you all know the Say What are those things that you just can't believe that are happening, but they really are happening. So the first part of my Say What is according to the Animal Planet, and that's a organization, a program that comes on your TV, and also is on a lot of our internet, social media areas. So koala bears, y'all know those are little bears. They look so like they're some good pets that you can maybe have. But anyway, those bears and human fingerprints are so similar that they have been confused at crime scenes, because like ours, they each have unique patterns. Can you imagine a koala bear looking at their fingerprints, and you look at the hand and it's similar to our own fingerprints? So, we know that about, gorillas and chimpanzees, but actually koala bear, and I might not be pronouncing it correctly, but you all know what I'm talking about. So I just thought that was very unique. I said, say what? Wow. And that means that they were at a crime scene. Whether you got caught, you said, nah, that wasn't me. It was a koala bear. I really wasn't there. So that was a good Say What segment. The next part is to Say What. This is a little bit more serious. When you are part of a party, as if I'm with the Democratic Party, you always are looking at fairness when it comes down to during the election cycle. And when you have a party that's setting up to conduct phone banking for candidates who haven't even won the primary, which means that for particular candidates, and they have other opponents in the race with them, but they're narrowing down on these few candidates, that's an unfair process. And we talk about voter suppression with the other party, but there's internal voter suppression that's going on across this state in the Democratic Party of Georgia, and I would say it. And I'm definitely going to speak on it later and with more details about it, but I want to bring that up and to Say What. Yeah, Say What, you can't believe it. And sending out mailers with Democratic leaders on there who have opponents also in the Democratic primary. And so that's an unfair advantage to them that are in those positions. Now, I'm not talking about people individually that end up supporting other candidates. I don't have an issue with that. But when the party itself sends out a mailer that says paid for by the Democratic Party of Georgia, and you see candidates who are running for office right now as Democrats and have opponents, that's to Say What. So I wanted to leave with that. And yes, your vote is important, but also leadership matters. And you have individual people that can make these changes happen. I told you all earlier, our last meeting, or not last meeting, this is our meeting, but the last show about the Atlanta Press Club not taking on doing the debates of the forum for Congressional District 5. This was the first time the incumbent have ever had to have an opponent in a primary election. The other time that person was appointed. And even if you look at that, unfairly appointed, because it was 131 people, 130 people that applied for that appointment. So there are a lot of things that are going on in this particular race. A lot of you all don't understand. There's a lot of behind the scene things, and it's the manipulation of the voters because you're unduly persuading voters in one direction instead of letting them make their own decision about the candidates and giving everyone a fair opportunity. So I will end that there. And today is our last show for this season. So I'm going to miss seeing you all, but we'll be back. We will be back in a couple of months, rebooted and redesigned, and with even more good information to be able to give you as a listening audience. We want you to spread the word, continue to look at our WCEG network. We have some awesome hosts of different shows, and everybody has their own unique flavor. And that's what makes this WCEG Talk Radio one of the top internet radio stations here across the world, because we're actually worldwide. Y'all heard me say that earlier. So tune in, to look at some of those episodes that you might have missed and want to find out some more. But we won't be back until a couple of months from now. And you can watch us on our YouTube channel, WCEG Network. And so, YouTube, it's almost like watch on demand. You can move it forward, you can reverse it, you can move it forward, get right to that good little part. And so y'all stay safe. There's so many things going on, and we'll be back. And, our prayer is that when we return back in a couple of months, I'll be coming back as your next congressional district congressional district nominee for Congressional District 5. So you all be safe, take care, and have a good day and rest of this week. Remember, May the 24th is that very, very important day for election. Make sure you go out and vote and check your status on my voter page. All right, have a good one.